Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Jubinville, and it's a pleasure to be with you for this webinar today during Administrative Professionals Week. Today we'll be actually talking about emotional intelligence in the workplace. And before your inner skeptic maybe takes over and you might dismiss emotional intelligence as the latest buzzword, let's try to understand exactly what it is and why this topic is so important in the workplace, especially for administrative professionals. So first, everyone, I'm going to pause for some brief introductions. I'll start with myself quick. My name is Sarah Jubinville. I am the practice director across North America for Robert Half, specifically focused on OfficeTeam. And I've been with the company for about 10 years. I'm based out of our Minneapolis market, but have a primary responsibility of partnering with approximately 300 of our offices across the United States and Canada. So that's the cliff notes on my background, and we are very excited to have some extremely special guests with us today. Joshua, if you're on the line, would you mind introducing yourself to all of our attendees?
I'm feeling extremely special now. I'm Josh Friedman. I'm the CEO of a nonprofit called 6 Seconds. And we work all over the world in over 125 countries, teaching people how to actually use emotional intelligence at work, at school, and in their own lives.
Great. Thanks, Joshua. And do we have Joan on the line? Joan, could you introduce yourself and provide a brief summary of what you do, please?
Yes. Hello, everyone, and happy Administrative Professionals Week. I'm Joan Burge. I'm the founder and CEO of Office Dynamics International. I am housed here in Las Vegas. Since 1990, Office Dynamics has been a leader in the development and presentation of sophisticated training programs and information for administrative professionals, and I've also authored 4 books for administrative professionals.
Thank you, Joan. Quite the background. Kamisha, if you're on the line, please, would you mind providing an introduction about yourself, please, and a summary of what you do?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Kamisha Foley here. I am a certified administrative professional with a specialty in organizational management, and I currently work for the American Staffing Association as coordinator in our research department, and also as an instructor for the Administrative Certificate Program for the Workforce Development Division for Northern Virginia Community College.
Great. Thanks, Kamisha. All right, everyone. So let's get going here and start with just a few housekeeping points. First, the webinar is being recorded. In case you missed part of the webinar today or want to share this with others, just know that you'll receive an email after the live event with a link to the archived version. Also, there are several features on your webinar player to help enhance today's discussion. You can scroll over each icon at the bottom of your screen to learn more. There's also going to be a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, so feel free to enter questions at any time in the Q&A box on the left side of your screen. And the webinar is actually eligible for 1 CAP recertification point through the International Association of Administrative Professionals. About a week after the event, attendees who participate in full live webinar will receive actually a certificate that can be used for verification purposes for you. You can also access a copy of today's slides by clicking on the green icon with a piece of paper on it. And if you need any technical assistance during the live session today, click yellow icon with a question mark on your toolbar. Also, everyone, feel free to tweet along during today's event using hashtag APWWebinar. You can also follow our tweets at the OfficeTeam handle. So that's the cliff notes. Let's dive right in. What we'll cover today, number 1 is what is emotional intelligence, first of all. Number 2 is why is this so important in the workplace? 3, how to become more emotionally intelligent. And 4, tips for showcasing your skills in this area. So much of what we'll talk about today, everyone, is described in more detail in our Office Team guide. It's called Emotional Intelligence at Work, what it is and why you should care. And this booklet contains advice for basically boosting emotional intelligence and recognizing it in potential hires. It also has data from surveys of more than 600 HR managers and 800 workers in the United States and Canada. All right, so what exactly is emotional intelligence, or EQ as it's called? And I'm going to turn it over to our EQ expert, the Joshua Friedman, to let us know more about emotional intelligence. So Josh, I'll turn to you.
Thank you. I'm always a little worried when people call me an expert in emotional intelligence, because if my teenagers hear that, they'll mock me endlessly, knowing how there's a difference between knowing what it is and being able to really practice it every day. But in simple terms, when we talk about emotional intelligence, it just means being smarter with feelings. Emotions are data. They're information about how we're perceiving the world inside us and around us. And just like any kind of data, mathematical data, linguistic data, to be smart with it means we've got to accurately get that data, and we use it to solve problems. And any administrative professional, I am sure, is got lots of emotional data to draw on in themselves and the people they work with, and lots of problems to solve. Some of those are technical problems, but a lot of them are relational and people challenges. I won't call them problems. And being smarter about emotions is how we can be more effective in that area.
Perfect. Well said, Joshua. Well said. So if we can move to the next slide, I think the next question is, obviously to Joshua's point, EQ is important in the workplace. It absolutely is. So we've got a few facts on this slide here that convey that. In fact, according to our Office Team survey, 95% of HR managers and 99% of workers said it's important for employees to have emotional intelligence. And more than 1 in 5 employees, so that's 21%, also said that EQ is more valuable at work than IQ. And 65% stated they're actually equally important. So also, most workers, 92% in fact, think that they have strong EQ. Slightly fewer, 74%, believe that their bosses do. All right, so why is EQ so important at work? Joshua, I'm going to let you take that question.
Okay, I guess there are two perspectives. And we're getting a little echo, so I'm not sure what we can do about that. But one perspective is looking at ourselves and our own careers and seeing how emotional intelligence will help us get ahead. And there's quite a lot of research showing that people who are using their emotional intelligence are more likely to advance in their careers. They're able to handle complexity. They're more balanced. I don't want to say happier because that's a little bit too surface. There's kind of a profound well-being that's associated with emotional intelligence, better relationships, better quality of life, and more effectiveness. From the organizational perspective, lots of case studies and research showing that in organizations where they're using emotional intelligence actively as part of their people development strategy, that staff retention is higher, customer experience is better, leadership is more effective, profits are better. We just published another case study yesterday about this in hospitality, showing that emotional intelligence helped people work better together in their organization, which created better guest experience, which led to a 25% increase in sales. And just one more point about this. We live now in an era where we're on 24/7, and we have massive amounts of ways to be connected, and yet people actually feel less connected than ever before. So we have rising stress, we have rising isolation, people are struggling to kind of handle all the noise of the current environment. And in that really noisy environment, something just so profoundly basically human as emotions can help us connect with ourselves and each other and be more careful. And I think we desperately need that in the world today.
Agreed. Thanks, Josh. And you just led us into kind of the next piece really well, which is, emotional intelligence is just so important for virtually, like you mentioned, really all levels of workers. And, I think we all can agree that this is especially true for administrative professionals. And in fact, chances are, I think that, a lot of you with us today have really good EQ considering your jobs. So I guess, Kamisha, with your experience as an administrative professional, can you tell us a little bit about why it's so valuable to have emotional intelligence in this role?
Hi, thanks, Sarah. Yes, absolutely. I think the most important thing to note is that we are generally the first people folks come in contact with when they come to our companies, whether it's through the phone or at the front desk. And to be able to make that emotional connection and be aware of the state of that person is really important. And I think all of us have been in a situation where we've been around somebody who's been hungry and angry at the same time. So I usually keep that in mind whenever I come across anybody that seems a bit out of sorts.
Perfect. Thanks, Kamisha. And Kamisha just led us also into the next topic really well, which is how companies benefit when workers are emotionally intelligent. Organizations as a whole benefit when employees are emotionally intelligent. About 43% of HR managers identified increased morale and motivation as the greatest benefit of having workers with high emotional intelligence. But other benefits also include things like improved leadership, certainly better collaboration, and effective conflict resolution. So Joan, given your experience, is emotional intelligence something that you find valuable with your team?
Yes, I find it extremely valuable and have had some interesting experiences in having my company for almost 27 years, but especially last year it was interesting because we did have one individual in the organization who is no longer with us because she really did not use emotional intelligence. She would get quite emotional, and you could immediately tell when she wasn't happy about something or she was upset. And just her tone or her attitude or her closing up or shutting down would affect the other members on my team. And we are a small team here in this office. And that was not good. It wasn't good for, again, the coworkers. It wasn't good for me as a leader. It wasn't good for even, what then we could give to our clients. So it is very important. And then I see the difference when now I have an individual who has taken that position, who uses a lot of emotional intelligence and pays attention and is observant and doesn't get all moody. And although I know emotional intelligence isn't the same as being emotional in moods, but it is using, that part. That makes a difference. And so there's a whole different feel here. And one thing I know that really struck me when I was thinking about when you talked about improved leadership and better collaboration. So what struck me, one of the elements of emotional intelligence is Daniel Goleman calls social awareness. And that's about I know you. So just imagine if I'm paying attention as an employee, I'm paying attention to you and the others in the organization and adapting as I need to with you, we're going to have a better relationship, better rapport, better collaboration, and then we're going to produce better results. And I also was thinking for the administrative professional, they really need to demonstrate leadership. So it's very important in that position. And another dimension of emotional intelligence is social skill or relationship management. So when I think about assistants and being leaders and being visionaries and leading by example and modeling change that they want to see in others. So it really, really is very important.
Great, thanks, Joan. And Joan really highlighted several aspects of EQ that I think are just really critical to the results of, like she mentioned, different companies and organizations, as well as the employee in general. So with that, now let's just take a little, look a little bit more into EQ and its importance. How do you actually make use of this information? So let's start by looking at the 5 key components of emotional intelligence identified by Daniel Goleman, a psychologist and author who helped popularize emotional intelligence. So there's 5 topics here. Number 1 is self-awareness. 2 is self-regulation. 3, motivation. 4, empathy. And 5, social skills. So let's talk about tactics that can help boost your emotional intelligence based on these 5 areas. You can start by stepping back and taking notice of your own emotions when they surface. What situations or people trigger them, and how do you react? Also, you can ask for input on how you're coming across to others. Think about how your behaviors may impact your colleagues. And if you manage others, just being aware of your actions and emotions can be the difference between really employees staying at your company or frankly, maybe giving notice. All right, so think before you react. It's natural to get emotional, I think, in stressful, situations. And the key to really improving your EQ is learning to keep a close watch on your emotions and controlling them, when things don't always go smoothly. So keep these stats in mind. They're right off the slide here for you guys. More than 6 in 10 employees, so 61%, admitted they've let emotions get the better of them in the office. And the second stat here is that 86% of workers said when a colleague doesn't control his or her emotions, it affects their perception of that person's level of professionalism. So with that, Joshua, do you have any other tips for, I guess, kind of keeping your cool at work, if you will, when things get tough?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, first of all, to acknowledge that there are a lot of times that it does get tough, and we have a lot of stress in our work lives, especially given the complexity. I'm sure a lot of people listening feel like their jobs get really complicated really quickly. There's some interesting new research on stress, which is that if you think about the physiology of physical reaction you have when you're stressed and, your heart starts to pound and your palms sweat a little bit, your breathing gets shallow. That's the same reaction you have when you're excited, actually. And so if you can start thinking about these stressful situations, saying, okay, what's exciting in this situation? That's a really powerful tool for kind of finding the positive side of that stress. I also encourage you to remember that emotions are not a problem. We're not trying to stick emotions in a box, but to say, okay, this emotion is telling me something about how I'm perceiving the situation. And am I perceiving it as, as a problem, or am I perceiving this as, part of the value that I'm going to add in people, in my work and in people's lives and in my own life today? This emotion, if I can tune into it when it's small, and say, okay, here's something interesting going on here. Let me tune into this issue or this challenge, or this is a signal of something happening. What's happening? And kind of get into that emotion before it starts turning into something really big and hard to handle.
Perfect. So Joshua just filled us in on how we can keep our cool, everyone. So now I think it's time to get motivated. This next piece is motivate yourself and your team. I think we all know that motivation is a very, very powerful force for good in the workplace. And when you and your colleagues feel motivated and enthusiastic, I think we all have positive interactions, and frankly, we're happier by creating that type of work environment overall. So with that, Joan, what are some ways that you try to keep, your team motivated with your company?
Well, thank you for asking because that's really important to me, and we do several things. One idea or one tool we use that we absolutely love is this whiteboard that we have, and it's in a central area where we all pass several times throughout the day. Everyone can see it. And we all take turns coming up for what's the self-fulfilling prophecy we want for today. So maybe on a Monday morning we walk in and we put on that whiteboard, Magnificent Monday, and that's what our focus is for the day. And even when the day isn't going exactly how we planned, we all say it's a magnificent Monday, and then we might have a terrific Tuesday and thankful Thursday. So we all take turns. So that's fun because everybody gets to be creative. Of course, I had one employee who's actually my son who works in my company, and last Friday he put something about, leaving at 4:30 Friday. And I thought, okay, right, yeah, we but we have fun with it. It does make us laugh, and it does keep us positive and upbeat. Another one that I love to do is to break up our routine because we can get quite intense around here. We have a lot of work to do with being a small team. And so because training is what I do almost all the time, I'm always looking for ways to break it up. So we'll just do something spontaneous. I'll call the group together and say, hey, let's go into the conference room, and we'll do a quick 5-minute team building activity. One day, this was really kind of funny, and you have to be very careful. Of course, we have a small group, but Sean Stevenson is a wonderful example of positivity. He has a disease that he lives in a wheelchair, basically. And he can't do anything by himself. If anyone wants to check him out, he's phenomenal talking about attitude and motivation. And he has this little video called Dance Party, and he does a dance party with you, and he's in his wheelchair doing it. And so when I found this a couple years ago, I told everybody, come on in the conference room, sit in a chair, and we're going to do this dance party with Sean Stevenson. I mean, he was such a prime example of good attitude. And then, of course, rewarding people as things happen. And also, I just want to interject that I believe administrative professionals are in a wonderful position in place to motivate others. They are the core. They are the hub. And there's just fun things you could do. You could post quotes around. You could put a positive Post-it on someone's desk. So positivity is important, I think, especially today because we have a lot of stuff going on in our world. And so we need to work at that, keeping our motivation going.
Great. Thanks, Joan. I mean, it sounds like you have just an excellent company culture. And I think one of the gifts we can all hear from Joan is that she has an ability to understand others and listen up. So let's learn from the pro and focus on these 3 topics, which is listen closely. Number 2 is empathize. And then also notice nonverbal cues. So maybe starting with empathy, I think we all know that empathy does play a big part in emotional intelligence. And it's really the ability to, understand the feelings, the needs, wants, and maybe viewpoints of others. We also have talked about in the past and through actually our OfficeTeam pamphlet as well is just really listen, be present and fully engaged. Don't think maybe a step ahead or about other things when someone's talking. Actively listen. And be aware of nonverbal cues, so things like facial expressions or behaviors. Kamisha, if you don't mind me calling on you again, why are empathy and good listening skills especially important, do you think, in the administrative profession?
That's great, Sarah. I think the really important thing is that most perception of the administrative professional is that we're constantly multitasking, and when somebody comes to us for assistance, it's very important for us not to try to continue in that path and to be present. Basically, stop what you're doing and make eye contact with that person. And part of the part of the comments that you mentioned was to talk about, don't try to think a step ahead. And that reminds me of that Stephen Covey quote, most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. And I think that's human nature. to do so. But when somebody is upset at your desk or on the phone, I think in terms of empathy, it's just really important to remember to put yourself in that person's shoes, take a deep breath, and just remember that other quote that everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about, and you don't know what's going on with that person. And I always try to keep that at the forefront because it allows me to take myself out of that emotional connection and be calm and just say, how can I help this person? But it's really important to make eye contact, stop what you're doing, and make sure that that person knows that they have your full attention.
Great, thanks, Kamisha. And your comments, I think well said, also really tie into the importance of, polishing our social skills. And even if you're naturally an introvert, you can cultivate good social skills, which will serve you really throughout your career. Joan, if you, I guess, don't mind me calling on you again as well, I guess what tips do you have for improving your interpersonal skills at work?
Well, thank you. This is really important because, one, I've been teaching interpersonal skills to assistants for 27 years, and I want to just add in that we survey executives, managers, human resource people, training and development, and assistants on a regular basis as to what they look for in an administrative professional. Time and time again, 90% of what is on the list are the interpersonal skills. So as far as the steps, first of all, you really have to determine what interpersonal skills you need to improve. I mean, there are so many of them. So if you are not sure of what the interpersonal skills are, do your research. I mean, Google, everything's out there, and get a list of the interpersonal skills, at least a list of maybe 15 of them, let's say, and objectively rate yourself. First of all, how well, like over a year's time, how well do you do in that area or that particular interpersonal skill? Second step is to be brave and ask others to rate your interpersonal skills. People who know you, who watch you, who observe you, and ask them to identify where they think you should grow. It's really hard. A lot of times we think we're great at all kinds of things, but others certainly can have a different view that could be very helpful to us. The third step, and I have 5 steps. So the third step, take courses, read, attend webinars like today to just absorb and learn. And then number 4, you have to practice and practice and practice. And, for some people, some skills come easier, and for others, it's a big stretch. And then number 5, get feedback on your progress from an objective person. That's really important. And what I thought I would do is just quickly mention maybe 5 interpersonal skills quickly for assistants that they could work on, that I believe assistants can continually work on. One is to create synergistic relationships with your peers. Peer power is what I call it. And it's so important to create those, the rapport with your administrative peers. Another one to work on is to tactfully voice your opinion. That if you can learn to tactfully voice your opinion, that's going to take you a long way in the workplace. A third interpersonal skill, really high advanced competency for administrative professionals, are persuasion skills. A lot of times assistants don't see themselves as needing to be salespeople. How do I know this? Because they'll say, well, I asked my executive if I could go to this event or this conference, and they said no, so I guess that's the end of it. Do you know that is a really critical skill in the workplace, whether you're trying to persuade someone on a process or to support your education? I just have a few left. I'll go quickly. Networking skills, of course, are very important, and I know a lot of assistants sometimes aren't comfortable at going to an event where they don't know someone. Attitude is a very important interpersonal skill, and I teach this quite a bit about attitude is a choice, and how do you develop that? And I think that plays into what Josh was saying, with emotions and when things aren't going your way, what attitude are you going to choose? And the last one I had on the list here was conflict resolution skills, or what I call consensus building, learning to build consensus with people when you disagree on something. So those are my tips.
Thanks, Joan. So, guys, we have 5 key points from Joan that I know I was taking notes with, so look forward to everyone applying those. So thanks a lot, Joan. And Joshua, do you have any other general pointers on how to improve your emotional intelligence?
Sure. I think Joan kind of referred to getting off of autopilot, and I don't know about the rest of you, but for myself, I know a lot of my day, 95% of the day, I'm just kind of going and doing and reacting, and I'm not really paying attention to the fact that I'm making choices. So I would boil it down to kind of 3-step process. One is noticing and saying, okay, I am feeling things, I'm reacting, what's happening? And it just takes a couple seconds to kind of tune in and say, okay, I'm just going to get off autopilot here and say, I'm here. What am I feeling? What am I doing? Am I doing the same old thing that I always do? Or am I really being present here in this moment? So that's the first step, is noticing. And then the second step is to recognize that I have a choice. And I have a choice about how I think, I have a choice about how I feel, and I have a choice about how I act. And am I making those choices, or am I just kind of mailing it in? Am I really using this moment? And not to be doom and gloom here, but we don't know how many moments we have. And this moment, am I just kind of trying to make it through the day, or am I actually contributing something in this moment? And that brings us to the last step, which is to pay attention to what I'm adding to the world. I used to ask my kids this all the time and drive them crazy. Are you adding meanness, or are you adding kindness? What are you adding in the world right now? And is that what you want to be adding? So we call those 3 steps: know yourself, choose yourself, give yourself. Know means just paying attention what's happening. Choose means saying, I'm going to pause, I'm going to be intentional. And give is, what am I adding to the world right now? And it sounds a little esoteric, but it's actually super practical, and it's kind of fun to be sitting there in a moment, you're in a meeting, you're listening, and just go through these three steps, being more aware, being more intentional, being more purposeful, and then do it again, and do it again, and do it again.
Great. Thanks, Joshua. So, I think we've learned many tips now just from Joshua's last comments and also Joan's about, polishing our social skills. And I think now it's time for us to focus on showing them off. So showing off our emotional intelligence. It's apparent that emotional intelligence is getting to be really highly prized in terms of attributes in the workplace. So how can you make sure your boss knows you've got EQ? It all comes down to, positive interactions at work, being a great leader, and showing you can navigate through different issues. So let's focus on conflict resolution. You can also use emotional intelligence to resolve conflicts at work. We all encounter different situations, of course, in the office. And conflict can result from unclear or maybe unrealistic expectations, poor or inconsistent communication, maybe differing opinions or work styles, or it could even just be like a simple misunderstanding. And while you may be tempted to, immediately react to things and tell others it's, maybe your way or the highway, I know I've been there, that's usually not the best way to go. So a few things for all of us to remember. Number 1 is just getting a handle on our emotions. Number 2 would be communicate clearly and calmly, stating your understanding of the facts and listening actively to other parties and asking questions. 3 is, you might choose to state a desired outcome and ask others for input, just like Joan mentioned before, on how you would like to resolve the issue. And lastly, and maybe ideally, the end result will be a conversation that will lead to a resolution that, frankly meets hopefully everyone's needs. So now that we've got a better understanding of emotional intelligence, let's work together to talk through some common workplace scenarios and how you can use EQ to handle them. For each of these, I'll talk through the situation, give you a few moments to think about it, and then one of our presenters will provide some advice. So here's scenario number 1. You've been asked to make travel arrangements for team members attending a conference in another city. Wanda, who's a director, is very particular about everything, including hotel accommodations. She usually prefers the Ritz-Carlton because she loves gourmet dining choices and a 24-hour fitness center and nightly turn-down service, but the Ritz is booked. So how do you break the news to Wanda without upsetting her? So take a few seconds to think about how you may approach this situation and maybe how you would use your emotional intelligence. All right, so pausing there for a second while you guys are thinking through that, Kamisha, I bet you can give us some pointers on this one. I know you've handled a lot of these types of scenarios, not only in the past but also in your role today. What would you do in this situation?
Well, I think it's really important. Timing is everything. And if you have created that rapport that Joan talked about earlier and have a good read on the people that you work with, you have a good sense of timing. And administrative professionals also have access to calendars, so we know we don't want to have this conversation right after a 3-hour meeting when Wanda may be tired. We also, secondly, need to have options available. So before we even go to her with these options, we need to make sure we have something that's comparable, several selections with all the details ready to go, so that when we take her this situation, we're saying, hey, this might not work, but here are the 3 choices that I have that are options that also have great gourmet dining. And if you want, I put some links to you in the email about their menus if you want to take a look at them before you give me an answer about where you want to be put up. And generally, if you give those options and you have that conversation when it's a good time, you're going to have a good outcome, and it's going to be a pleasant experience as opposed to rushing in without an answer, without any solutions, and at a bad time.
And that's why you're the pro. All right, so we're going to move on to scenario 1 now, guys, to scenario number 2. So here's the situation. You're in a cross-departmental meeting to discuss options for new expense report software. And your colleague, George from IT, he's looking really annoyed and says that this meeting is a total waste of time because the current software is just fine. Then you've got Marla from HR who's rolling her eyes and maybe shouts at George because George does this every time, and she storms out. How do you tap into your emotional intelligence to restore the peace? So I'll pause there and give you guys a few seconds to think about this one. All right, so Joshua, can you help us out here on this one?
I think I want to hide under the table. I have a couple of thoughts. One is, I think we need to pay attention to, if it's me, I need to pay attention to my role in this situation. Is there some part of this that I can control? Probably not. Is there some part of this I can influence? Probably so. And I need to not take responsibility for the stuff that's not my responsibility, because I'm going to end up feeling I might get caught up in it. I might get caught up in the drama. I might be feeling a lot of pain because of this situation. It's really not my problem. So just distinguishing between, where is my responsibility here? Where is my influence? How can I be a good team player? but not taking the monkey on my back. The second thing I want to share is a little tool we teach called VET. You don't take your emotions to the psychologist, take them to the vet. That was supposed to be a joke. Thank you. V is for validate. And so acknowledging the emotions, acknowledging my emotions, acknowledging others' emotions. So, you know, whether I'm talking to George a little bit later or Marla a little bit later, you know, I probably can't do it right there in the meeting, but saying, wow, it seems like you're frustrated, you know, or even just asking, wow, how are you feeling, George, you know, or acknowledging, validating your own feelings as well. And then explore is asking, what is this feeling telling me? So I have this premise that even, you know, George's behavior is maybe not acceptable, and Marla's behavior is almost certainly not acceptable. But their feelings are legitimate and real, and they're there for a reason. And I think one of the things we all need to learn how to do is empathize without jumping on the bandwagon with somebody. And we don't need to say, you know, oh, Marla, you're right, you should have stormed out. We can say, wow, Marla, it seems really like a really frustrating situation for you. You know, how are you doing? It doesn't mean we agree with her behavior and we're coming on her side and we're getting into a gossip thing or polarizing. We're just acknowledging her feeling and saying, you know, what's going on? How, you know, what's making you so frustrated? And then transform. Once we've validated and explored the feeling, it's relatively easy to transform it. And this applies to ourselves as well. So if I'm sitting there going, wow, I'm feeling scared, I'm feeling upset, I'm feeling nervous, I might even be feeling a little amused, or I might be like, I have a range of feelings. What am I feeling? Validate. Explore. What are these feelings telling me? Well, I'm feeling this because of this, and this because of this. And then transform. A really nice way to work on transforming is saying, well, what else am I feeling? Or what can I add here? Remember, what am I adding to the world? What can I add here to move the situation towards a more purposeful and caring resolution?
Perfect. Thanks, Joshua. I appreciate all the pointers. All right, guys, so here's the last scenario. Angry customer calls and wants to speak to your boss. Your boss is in meetings all day and cannot be bothered. How can you calm this person down and handle this issue? So maybe I'll move right to Joan while you guys are all thinking about kind of how you would react to this. But Joan, what advice would you give for this common scenario?
I'm going to give 4 easy steps. So number 1 is listen. That's the number 1 most important. Upset, angry people just want to be heard, need to vent sometimes. The second step would be to empathize with them. They want to be taken seriously, too. So show your empathy, express your empathy. Number 3 is to clarify. You know, do you really understand their issue or their problem or their concern? So a great technique is to repeat what you think they told you to make sure you've understood it. And number 4 is to problem solve. So maybe explain some options to them, ask what they would like to have happen, and then summarize the actions and end pleasantly.
Great. Thanks, Joan. All right, hopefully everybody following along with this webinar came up with similar solutions that use emotional intelligence, just like our presenters did. All right, letting employers know you've got EQ. How about if you're looking to change jobs? You know, how can you showcase your EQ skills to prospective companies? Keep in mind, 70% of HR managers that we surveyed anyways, said that their company uses reference checks to really gauge the job applicant's EQ. And 55% use behavioral-based interview questions. So we'll get to your references and the interview in a bit, but let's start with your resume. In application materials, give examples of how you overcame objections, resolved conflicts, and increased team effectiveness. Employers can tell a lot by how you describe your goals and accomplishments. You also want to express desire to collaborate with others or to lead. And when describing group projects, do you also recognize contributions of others on the team, not just yourself? So highlight your interpersonal and communication skills is really the moral. Now, how do you apply this during the interview? So the interview is a perfect opportunity for hiring managers to get a sense of your EQ. Be ready to answer, things like behavioral interview questions, and you might want to think about, the fact that employers want to hear how you've handled past environments and different situations. As we hear often, sometimes company culture and how you adapt to these different environments are really critical to a successful hire. So some questions hiring managers may ask to help determine emotional intelligence include, and I'll just read a few here for you guys, but how did you resolve a workplace conflict? I'll skip a few below here, but what type of work environment brings out your best performance and maybe your worst? And another one to consider is, tell me about a colleague that maybe you didn't get along with, and why do you think that you guys didn't see eye to eye? All right, so your references. So we've passed the interview now. Now let's on to the references. Have a prep call with your references, and your references should be prepared to discuss and provide examples of a few following things. How you maybe handled criticism, resolved conflict, listened to others, and motivating team members. All right, so what's your EQ? So are you ready to boost your emotional intelligence? You can start with a self-assessment, and you can test your EQ by taking our quiz at the URL on your screen. And you can actually also download a copy of our research guide too. The link to this page is also available by clicking on the green resource icon on your screen. So remember, it may take some effort and commitment to adapt to the idea of using emotional intelligence skills in the workplace. Once you and your team start exercising these types of skills, you'll realize that this effort really does pay off. All right, so I've talked your ear off. At this point, I'd like to open the floor to any questions that you might have. We might not have time to address all the questions, but we'll certainly try to answer as many as we can. Cynthia Kong, whom is our Public Relations Manager for OfficeTeam, will now help us with the Q&A portion. So Cynthia, I'll turn it to you.
Thanks, Sarah. So I'm going to put Joshua on the spot first with the first question here. And it's, is there a parallel between intuition and emotional intelligence?
Yes, I think so. I think when we talk about intuition, what we're talking about is noticing a lot of really subtle clues. And I think one of the great ways we can develop and practice emotional intelligence is by being detectives and to go about our days, particularly those challenging moments, saying, okay, what are the clues here? And whether you're dealing with your colleagues or your boss or your teenagers, there are actually a lot of clues out there. And I think people who just pay attention to those clues, maybe subconsciously, they often call it intuition. But I think the rest of us, and I hope for myself I'm getting better at it, of being able to notice those little subtle clues of emotions that people are giving all the time. There's tons of emotional data just there for the taking if we choose to open our eyes and our hearts to it.
Thanks so much, Joshua. And then, Kamisha, I have a question here for you. How do you function in an environment where the culture is cold and a little bit old and stuck in their ways and doesn't embrace emotional intelligence?
Wow, that's a great question. I think, first off, it's to know what is the best form of communication. Do they really prefer to be spoken with face-to-face, or are they more of an email culture? And how do you, kind of break that ice? It's just to build that trust, make sure you're delivering on everything else that you're supposed to be doing. Because once you build that trust with them, some of that will warm up. But it can be challenging if you're an extrovert like myself. You run into folks who are just you just have to be aware of where that person is coming from. Perhaps they have just years of experience, and it's hard for them to understand how fast things are changing. And you just need to be able to ask questions too, like, is there something I can help you with? Is there something you'd like? I'm familiar with Twitter. Is there something I could take some time and show you? And just try to build that rapport first, and then work on the task centered around that in the atmosphere. I think that makes a big difference.
Thanks, Kamisha. Great points there. Joan, I have a question here for you. Someone was asking specifically about that example you provided about how you had an employee who didn't have the strongest emotional intelligence. They were wondering if there were steps you took to specifically, try to deal with that and empathize with that employee prior to their departure, or if you have any tips for how to deal with that type of situation.
We did have conversations with the individual. The first time it happened, I kind of brushed it off the first time we were in a meeting, and I could tell this individual didn't like a comment I had made about we needed to hold something for a side conversation for another meeting, and she just closed up. That was it during the whole meeting. So I let it ride, that first time, and just wanted to see if this behavior was going to happen again. So watching, observing, and then, yes, having to have the conversations and bringing those types of things to the individual's attention. And she would seem open at the time when we would have the conversations, but then it would happen again, even maybe a day or two later. And it would be an outburst with another employee here in the office. And I'm not sure if there wasn't something deeper going on. I do have to say that, because we certainly tried numerous times, and of course you have to document everything for HR purposes. And even when we had to let her go, she really came in to me as the CEO of the company. I could not believe what she said to me. I was really shocked about that. So that I'm a little wondering if maybe she really needed some extra help outside of what we could do for that individual. And so I think if it is difficult for a person to truly change or control their emotions, there may be something deeper going on. And I did consider that. We really thought maybe there's something deeper here than we know. And even when we would approach her, getting her responses. So there was a fine line, too, between privacy with employees and people being private. So it's a little tricky also in that respect. I would say that I know when I was an employee and I worked as an assistant for 20 years, if there was something going on with me in terms of my personal life, maybe things were, tough at home or with parents or children, that I would bring up the conversation first to my executive. I would say, gee, maybe, I may not be quite acting like myself right now, but that's because this is going on. And it is on my mind a bit, but I want you to know I'm going to do my very best. So I think on the flip side of it, we need to be good at, and maybe that's part of that, being emotionally intelligent, is being open in terms of your communication too, so that others don't have some real self-doubt about you and what's going on with you. And just knowing when and who to talk to openly. Obviously, I had a very good comfort level with my executives, but I didn't want them to think that I was slacking on the job and such. But there was something really going on at the time, and they were wonderful about it.
Great. Well, thank you, Joan. So the next question here I have for Joshua, and it is, do you see mindfulness and or meditation as a means to boost emotional intelligence?
Short answer, yes. I think that if we do some kind of practice, I am a pretty active and maybe a little impatient person. And so the idea of like sitting on a cushion or whatever doesn't really work for me. But I find that I can be mindful going for a walk. I can be mindful standing in the line at the grocery store. I can be mindful driving. I can be mindful in a meeting at the office. And what that means for me is that know yourself piece that I talked about earlier, of just tuning in a little bit more and noticing my breath, noticing my feelings, noticing myself. That kind of core practice of mindfulness, literally kind of being fully fully there, having my mind fully there, and I would add heartfulness, having my heart fully there. I think, from my own experience, I can tell you it's made a tremendous difference in my ability to get these emotional clues before they get big. And when I have my EQ train wrecks, which I certainly do, later when I'm sort of reflecting on what happened, I realized that most of the time I wasn't mindful. I wasn't noticing. I was on autopilot and just reacting, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and by the time I noticed it, it was really hard to handle. And so my time machine wish is frequently, I wish I could just go back and notice all those clues that were there. If I'd just been a little more mindful, I might have noticed that I was going off on the wrong track, or the situation was going off on the wrong track, and I could have redirected much more easily. And again, that know yourself, notice what's happening, choose yourself. I have a choice about my thoughts, feelings, and actions. And give yourself, where do I really want this to go? What's really important to me here? And that first step, that mindfulness step, is a step of getting this data that is, again, it's there all the time for us.
Great. Thank you, Joshua, for all those great insights. A question here for Kamisha. What should you do if your boss isn't emotionally intelligent? And I bet this comes up all the time.
Well, that's a great question. I think the most important thing is, are you emotionally intelligent? And are you aware? You have to be flexible as an administrative professional. You have to be able to work with different people and different personalities, and put it in perspective. If it's a deal breaker, you know that in your heart. If it isn't a deal breaker, then you need to come up with solutions and best ways to work with that person. I think a lot of folks, feel that they must, change somebody else, and I don't think any of us have had much success with that. Working with folks that maybe aren't a good, personality clash with us, or maybe they just have such a different approach to life that it just doesn't work in terms of, just how we want to help or work with our coworkers. That's a tough situation, and I think it's an individual's call on how much of that they can really take. But for the most part, it's really important to put it in perspective. Is it really that important to you? Does it interfere with your work? And 3, is this something that is a deal breaker? And can you work with that? Can you show your emotional intelligence and work around that, work through that?
Great, Kamisha. And, thank you, everyone, for the great questions today. I think that's all we have time for, but I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah to close us up.
All right, thanks, Cynthia. And to everyone on the webinar today, thank you guys so much for joining this afternoon. We know you have busy schedules, and so again, we appreciate you guys attending the webinar with us. And with that, I'd like to thank Joshua, Joan, and Kamisha for your great insights, Cynthia for all you do, and we hope you guys have all found the information interesting and useful as you navigate the rest of the year. So with that being said, we'll let everybody get back to their day. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.